Greetings to everyone. My name is Yoong and I'll be presenting about my design thesis titled Narrative Architecture as a Collective Memory Recuperation. So my site is in Seremban, so we did a bit of a study in Seremban and how does it transform until today. So one of the things that we would like to conclude is that Seremban has issues sort of like a devaluating sense of place, because based on our when we are doing the site analysis and study, one of the interesting things that we notice is there is a lot of abandoned buildings. So based on our study, there is 72 abandoned buildings within our study area of 1.5 kilometers radius. So so that makes me goes deeper into understand what is the issues having here. And when I go through all the studying the morphologies and the map, and I realized that in the map of this 1953 maps from Pemetaan Negara, they actually dropped down all the cinemas in their official maps. So it makes me wonder if cinema is so significant, but why there is no way to trace today. So that leads to my issue. Seremban has an issue of depreciation of local heritage and collective memory in Seremban. Seremban, with its relatively small land area but packed with at least 9 cinemas to service community in the commercial districts. Therefore, Seremban is potentially one of the key cities that boosted the economical values of film industry, at least in our land. Thus, it has a potential we can call it a city of cinema. So I studied deeper into the 9 cinemas in Seremban. So this is basically diagrams of all the background and the history of the Seremban and when it's built. So that leads me to a questions of what can we do about it? How can we reconnect all these building stocks with the history and also the collective memory of Seremban? So I take the initiative to study about Golden City Cinema. However, I'll be calling it Majestic Theatre instead, because the original buildings was a Majestic Theatre, but it closed down and then Golden City Cinema took over. So Majestic Theatres can be found all over Malaysia. We can find in Ipoh, Pudu, Kuala Pilar, Singapore, Penang, and Seremban. And it is located in Jalan Dr Krishnan, which is at this corner of Seremban. So this is basically historical timelines of Majestic Theatre. So in short, it was Majestic Theatre, and then Golden City Cinema took over when the theatre shut down. Later on, Windsor City Furniture Store took over after the Golden City Cinema shut down. What is so significant about the Majestic Theatre, because it's one of the earliest theatres in Seremban. It has a very distinctive architecture. It's very regional, important to represent the multicultural in Seremban. It can represent the history of Western colonization in Southeast Asia, and it's also the last surviving theatres building in Seremban. So this is basically a study of cultural significance of Majestic Theatre. So in short, it has a very importance to the architectural value, historical values, aesthetical value, and social values to the Seremban itself. And it's also very obvious because of its wider proportions along the streets level, along the Jalan Dr Krishnan. And here basically the major drawings, very typical single hall theatre. So it's also very important to understand the conditions of the urban scale of Seremban in order to associate with collective memory. So this portion of Jalan Dato' Bandar Tunggal is a perfect example to exhibit the reality of Malaysia urbanscape. While it used to be a monotonous colonial strict elevations, but over time, the ownerships of the building has provided a democratic space for building owners to renovate their building really based on their demand. For example, somebody want bigger signs in front of the building so that more people can see their building. So because there's a lack of rules and regulations to regulate the kind of architectures in Seremban, so we can see that this very unique signs of different architectural styles spreads all over Seremban. So these are the things that I can take into considerations when designing the building form later. Okay, why collective memory are so important? Because based on Aldo Rossi in his book The Architecture of City, collective memories are the basic elements in architecture, and the accumulations of collective memories will become the soul of the city, and the city will become the locus of the collective memories. This is to my design aim. My design aims is to rejuvenate Seremban through infill the urban voids into a place where local folks could gather to share their history and stories to visitors. And my design objectives are Majestic Theatre as a narrative architecture to collect, preserve and disseminate the collective memory of Seremban. And also secondly is about the architecture to infill and connect the urban scape of Seremban by igniting collective memory with architectural interventions. So here are basically the user group diagrams where Storyhouse officials runs the building. Public can come here for all these activities, gathering, dining, screening and performing. Okay, so here are basically my strategies of adaptive reuse. I'm going to use adaptation as my strategy, which involve additions to the place, introductions of new services, new users, or changes to be able to safeguard the place. So one of the key strategy I'm using is actually weave-in. So the new spaces and the old spaces have a better integration. And so basically here are my design strategies, but in short, my strategy involve adaptive reuse of spaces, and also extension of the new extensions with these three strategy, and also program in terms of the program we have with these strategies. So these strategies I will be elaborating directly in the design later. So okay, so here comes to elaborations of my design. Seremban Storyhouse, a narrative architecture as a collective memories recuperation. So I did a bit of a study of the building conditions. So the blues are the building components that can be removed due to its condition and lack of maintenance. And activity diagram are basically the original building maintain its original function with these additionals of spaces. So there is the more significant part is the whole street level are approachable with commercial and public spaces, and there's a courtyard in the middle. Okay, so here comes the ground floor plan. We can see the public lobbies basically at the junctions. So people, when passing through these buildings, they can just appreciate and view the entire buildings from here. And then there's a void of the public courtyards. The number 2 is the ticketing counters. Number 4 is basically the book cafe. And within the original buildings, the main functions are remain, but the back portion has break into a backstage and also a utility areas. And in terms of the street connectivity, it's a very good integration with the main road, so it doesn't have to worry about the fire appliances access, and people's public can approach the building in multiple access, and the circulation is controlled because the interior spaces are compartmentalized, so it doesn't have to worry about the security. So basically the blue and reds are basically the core area. And the basement are basically a commercial area where we have canteens, souvenir shop, and retails, and the middles are basically the public courtyard. And one floor below is basically the basement car park, and it goes above the ground floor plan. Is basically the first floor plan is a concourse area, and also with the entrance of the end stage theatre, the second theatre, and the back portions of the existing Majestic Theatre has transformed into a management office for the building. And on one floor above is the second floor plan, is the entrance towards the black box theatre, and on the topmost floor are basically a symmetrical gallery. One is on top of the Majestic Theatre and the other one is on a new extension, and in the middle are actually the roof garden where people can just relax a bit. Form design, so basically here is a front elevation. So form design are really about the conversation between old and new, enclosure and openness, form and space, vernacular or modernities, facade-oriented design or space-oriented design, or focus on ornaments or very minimal, timber, steel structures, very bright colors with very dark colors. So it's sort of like a conversation of contrasts with old and new and also other kind of elements. So the design strategies of during the form is really to assimilate into urban aesthetics, because the lack of rule and regulations to sort of like preserve the original architecture, sort of like a colonial architecture and stuff. So considering its grid-like urban form, the facade of the building is designed to practical formless to minimize the intimidating experience of the contrast of a building scale. So here are basically a spatial relationship diagram where lobbies serve as a core areas to connect with all the other spaces. And in terms of sectional perspective, it's all about a relationship between the old and new. Is about to have a better visual connection with each other, because when people are just moving around, they are able to have a conversation of old and new, where visitors are able to experience or observe the contrast between of both form and spaces. So here are the public courtyard. It's an idea that I adopt in from a tropical shop house, where it's for ventilation and sunlight. So here serve as the same function, but at the same time it's also a public space. In the section we can see a better relationship between street and the building form and the plaza. Front of the plaza is basically a reserve for a pocket space for street stalls, because street stalls are part of the collective experience of a single hall theatre, which is the typical hall theatres of the past generation. So the revitalizations of the old hall and the new black box theatre is actually a conversation between history and present. In the old buildings we are trying to respect the old history, but in the new one it's a statement of the present. and for when people performing inside, they can have engage with the urban scape of Seremban as well. So and then this is a backstage and a backstage of the Majestic Theatre. So it's sort of like the new structures are weaving into the existing structures. And in this section C, we can see the relationship between all the spaces within Majestic Theatre. So this is basically the back portions of the Majestic Theatre. So we have a new extension, new skin on top of the old building. And then basically this is a component drawing, where the isometric component drawing. And basically here are the differences between three different functions of the theatre. Okay, so the skin of the facade is sort of like a concept of the reflection of collecting memory, where it's made out of reflective perforated metal sheet. So during the time of the day, throughout the day, we can see different reflections of the buildings and the activities around it. So here's another view looking out from the Majestic Theatre, and basically the construction drawings of the Majestic Theatres, the re-adaptations, and also the new extension. And basically gallery views on top of the Majestic Theatre, and the front elevations of the building, and left elevations of the building, and the back elevations. Okay, so thank you for listening. So hereby I would like to show animation of the journey into the Seremban Storyhouse.